So we are reconvening our meeting, and I'd like to start with a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to public comment on agenda items. So in the back there is an agenda and a protocol for participation in a public meeting. So if there are any public comments on the items listed on the agenda, I'd like you to make them now. Anybody? Okay. So I'd like a motion from the board to amend the agenda to move item F1 to the first thing on the, oh wait, I'm sorry. I'm a little distracted today. I'd like to welcome Dominic as our student representative at the end of the table. We are thrilled to have students. I've known Dominic when he was about that high, could barely see over the table. So I'm thrilled to have him here and welcome the input of students in our work. So now I'd like a motion to amend the agenda. Second? Okay. So we're going to go to the agenda, part of the agenda listed as F, and it's F1 under new business.
All right. Resolved on the recommendation, the superintendent of schools appoint Jennifer Picco as the elementary school assistant principal in the tenure area of elementary school assistant principal to serve a 4-year probationary appointment effective October 25th, 2021 to October 24th, 2025, pending New York State Internship School Building Leader Certification anticipated December 2021. The annual salary of $140,000 prorated. Ms. Picco holds the following New York State certifications: permanent certifications in elementary education, pre-K 6, students with disability, birth through grade 2, reading K-12, and TESOL.
Second.
Questions or comments?
I just want to speak a little bit about the process and welcome Ms. Pico and her husband who are here with us this evening. As everyone's aware, Mr. Chicory had announced that he was resigning to take another position late this summer, and we quickly began our search. We ended up with well over 100 applicants for the position. We screened over 25 individuals, a screening committee of administrators and teachers. And then the 4 finalists were brought before 2 larger committees, including parents, administrators, support staff, and teachers. And of those 4 candidates, it was evident to everyone that Ms. Pico really rose to the top. She brought a tremendous amount of energy. It was evident there was a lot of thought and effort that went into the planning and execution of her presentation, as well as her answers in the interview portion. And I wholeheartedly recommend the board appoint her this evening to be our next assistant principal at Putnam Elementary School. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Welcome.
Congratulations. Do you have your speech prepared? Or did I not tell you?
Okay.
No. I won't put you on the spot, but.
I would like to say thank you so much for this opportunity.
You do
wanna
have,
just
if
come
you
up?
really are going to talk, you got to go to the mic.
So many nice things. I just want to say thank you again to the board and to Dr. Luft and to the administration for giving me this opportunity. I am coming to you with a ton of energy and passion, and I am so excited to help make your school's mission and vision fulfilled. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Your husband told me since you made him come to a school board meeting that you have to buy dinner tonight now, so. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to now move to the consent agenda. Item number 1.
Resolve the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the consent agenda items 2 through 7 as presented to the board at this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? Ms. Bellino, do you have a short summary?
The consent agenda tonight includes approval of CSE, CPSE placements, an updated 2021-22 substitute list, some additional work hours for various staff members. It authorizes the superintendent of schools to enter into an educational contract for a classified student. It amends one club advisorship position at the high school, and it approves the high school after-school detention staff.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Number, where are we? Consent agenda. Presentations. Wait a minute.
All right, so our first presentation this evening will be our external auditors. So I would like to begin by welcoming Mr. Chris Koff and Colleen Harris up to the mic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the board for taking the time out of their meeting tonight to
Can you
listen.
bring up the microphone, please? Dan?
Again, I'd like to thank the board for taking the time out of their meeting tonight to hear about the fiscal results for your June 30th fiscal year end. I would also like to thank the audit committee for all their help and assistance during the course of the audit. They helped us with the planning meeting, and then they just reviewed the fiscal results with us. And most importantly, I'd like to thank your business office for all the cooperation that they gave us during the time of the audit. As I explained to the audit committee, you're one of the first audits that kicks off the school season, so it's a lot of pressure on them to get the work done in a very quick and efficient way. With me tonight is Colleen Harris. She was the supervisor on site, so if you do have any questions about anything in specific, she's here to answer any of your questions. Okay. Let me do all have copies if you want me to keep going. Well,
Yeah, no,
minutes.
keep,
All right, so the first thing that we'd like to discuss are the responsibilities of management during the course of an audit. And management is responsible for selecting and implementing appropriate accounting policies for a district of your size, fairly presenting the financial statements in accordance with the United States GAAP, establish and maintain effective internal controls over your financial reporting. We look at the compliance with laws, regulations, provisions of contracts and agreements. You need to provide us with all the financial documents that we request during the course of the audit. And again, the most important thing is for the board to set the proper tone at the top so that if an individual from the public or an employee has an issue, they can come to you and discuss it. Our responsibilities, our deliverables, are the independent auditor's report, and I'm very pleased to say that our report is what's known as an unmodified opinion. It's also known as a clean opinion. We also do an extra classroom activity report for you. We also have required communications to those charged with governance, so the 3 meetings that we hold with the board. And then we also issue a management letter which has some recommendations and suggestions based on our findings. During the course of the audit, we do interview people for fraud to see if there is any suspicion of fraud going on in the district. We also do, through our testing, if we were to come up with anything that was suspicious, and I'm very pleased to say that nothing did come up during the course of the audit. We didn't encounter any difficulties during the course of the audit. There were no proposed journal entries that we had that the board or the administration opposed, and we didn't have any disagreements with management. So what I have here is, so you don't have to go through the big book, is I kind of summarized your general fund, the main operating fund of the district, and just so you can see how you did. So the first column is your original budget. That's the budget that's adopted by the board. The second column will be your final budget. During the course of any school year, you may modify that budget and pass a resolution. The third column is your actual results. The fourth column is for expenditures only. Those are what are known as encumbrances, purchase orders that were issued near year end where they might not have been fulfilled yet. So those are encumbrances, so they budgetarily roll over because they're not what's known as accounts payable. And then the variance with the final budget. So if we start with the original budget and we go to the third number up from the bottom, you will see in brackets a negative $2.7 million. So if everything in the district hit right on budget, that means that when you adopted your budget, you anticipated the use of fund balance, your prior year's reserves, to balance your budget of $2.7 million. That was made up of approximately three numbers. Last year you had $1.4 million worth of encumbrances that rolled over from the previous year. So those increased your budget. Then you also, during the course of the year, you appropriated $1,380,000 for reducing your tax levy. So when you put your budget together, in order to stay within the tax cap and to minimize the impact on the taxpayers, you use some of the prior year surplus to balance your budget. And that came to the $2.7 million. During the course of the year, you didn't modify that at all. You stayed at that $2.7 million. And when you slide across to the third column, the actual results, you'll see that the surplus was actually $1.99 million, almost $2 million. So you did approximately $4 million better than budget. Now, how did we do that? If you look at the first row, you'll see revenues. You came in about $1.6 million under budget on your revenues, and you came in about $3.2 million under budget on expenses. So not only did you exceed your revenue expectations, but you also were able to manage your budget and accumulate savings. On the next few slides, I'll try to explain in a little more detail. So your major revenues for the district are basically your property tax levy, your state aid, and this year you had a new revenue, some federal aid. So when you adopted your budget again, you anticipated almost $38 million worth of property tax. You came up about $93,000 short on that tax, and that's basically because during the course of the year, people filed challenges to their tax, what's known as tax certiorars, and this is the impact on the current year budget. So it was about $93,000. Then you had state aid. Now, state aid, you came in about $1.2 million over budget, and that's because last year, if you remember when I reported to you, the state and everybody was uncertain about where aid was going. And the district took the conservative approach, and the state had reduced their payments by 20%, and BOCES aid was reduced by 20%. So you put that money aside and didn't record it as revenue because you didn't know when you were going to receive it. Well, the good news was that the federal government passed quite a few bills trying to help communities with COVID, and the state was able to release those funds to you. So this year you got those monies that you had set aside last year, and that basically accounts for the $1.2 million that you came in over budget. And in this year, as I said, you have a new line in your general fund for federal aid. You did get some federal aid from the CARES Act to assist with running some of your programs. That amounted to about $151,000. So those revenues alone added up to about a $1.2 million variance. So those four accounted for the bulk of the variance. I put together a 5-year history for you just so you can see, the trend in those four revenue accounts. And I think the most important one to you is the property tax line. It's your major stream. And you can see that in 2017, between the STAR program and property tax, you raised about $35.4 million. And in 2021, you're at 37.9. So over that 5-year span, you did go up $2.5 million. But percentage-wise, every year, the cap of 2%, you come in at about an average of a little less than 1.75%. So you've done a good job of trying to manage your fund balance, manage the tax increases and attempt to keep your levy at the most reasonable level that you can. And again, with the last 2 years being so uncertain, COVID started at the end of the one school year where you'd adopted the budget, and then when you adopt your budget, you're planning on running a normal school year, and you face a lot of challenges. The expenditures, it's a little tougher to pinpoint major expenditures, so we kind of do it by category, because your budget consists of hundreds of lines of budget items, so we'd be here all night going over each one. But the first one on there is your general support. That includes legal fees, the business office, all the overhead departments. And you can see that they came in about $466,000 under their expected budget. That's the fifth column up there. And that 466, the bulk of that was in your operation of the facilities. Obviously, with the school being remote on-site, you didn't spend all the money that you had anticipated spending had you been open all year. So you had about a $225,000 to $250,000 savings in that one category alone. The rest was spread throughout all those other departments, as I said. Your teaching in the regular school came in about $500,000 under budget. Again, most of that is related to salaries. So you didn't utilize all the salaries and fill all your positions that you had in the budget. And then the next line is related to that. You have your employee benefits. Those are directly related to what you anticipate spending in salaries. You have to budget the benefits for those individuals. And there you came about $638,000 under your anticipated budget, with the bulk of that being in the employee retirement system. Because the stock market's had a good few years, the rates that they charge had continually dropped. So you saved about $356,000 on that line, and another $164,000 on your Social Security, your FICA line, because you did have positions and salaries that you saved money on. The next major area is your programs for students with disabilities. Again, the district at the beginning of the year tries to estimate how many students may need services, and they did come in under budget by about $575,000. So I guess the good news is as many students that you had planned for didn't need those services, and you accumulated some savings. The next two lines, pupil services and transportation, kind of go a little bit hand in hand, is that because you didn't have a lot of after-school activities and interscholastic sports, you had savings on both those lines, both in transportation, and you had savings on the pupil service line where you paid stipends for individuals for those programs. So all in all, this accounts for about $3 million of that savings. So it gives you an area where you are. And as I said to the board, one thing when you do your budget planning, you can't really anticipate that those savings are going to keep reoccurring, because again, 2020 and 2021 were kind of unique years where you weren't running at full speed, and things kept changing on a day-to-day basis for you as a board and for the administration. Again, I put the 5-year history in here just so you, again, for when you do your budget, you can kind of see some of the trending. And again, you'll see that most items are pretty much in line with 2019 again. Almost back to normal, hopefully. So, again, I would just keep monitoring those and keep your eye on those expenses. Your fund balance, which is what's important to a lot of people, because this is how much money that you have put away to address your future needs. The district utilizes what we call 4 buckets. You have a category called non-spendable in your fund balance, and that's for items that are like prepaid insurance where the policies overrun years, and health insurance you pay in advance. So you have about $275,000 of items that you've already paid for that'll be utilized in the current year that you're in now. Then you have your restricted fund balances. These are restricted by either state ed law or New York general municipal law. And these are all established by the board. The board passes all these. So the board has put away money, and we'll only talk about the major ones. You've put away money for tax surcharges. Those are challenges to people's tax assessment. And what you don't want to have to do is bond for those if you settle one. So you have about $1.1 million put away to address those future potential costs. You also have money put aside for the employee benefit and accrued liability. So pursuant to your contracts, when people leave service and they retire, they may have accumulated vacation, sick time, or that you have to pay out. You've estimated how much that is, and you've set aside that money to pay those bills, so you don't have to raise current tax to pay those. Then you have money put aside in the ERS and the TRS retirement systems reserves. And if you remember years ago when I first started presenting to the board, I was talking to you about double-digit increases in the retirement system. And what you've done is you've tried to build those reserves up, because we all know that if those start climbing back to 7, 8, 9, 10% a year like they were for years, this way you don't have to raise the tax. You've got some money put aside to help cushion that. In fact, if you look, you're using $250,000 of that for the 21-22 budget. So you have put aside $250,000 of your future surplus and not raise taxes to pay your retirement bill. And then the last category is future capital projects. You went to the public and you voted a capital project, and they authorized you to establish a reserve for future capital projects. I believe the amount is $9 million that you're allowed to do, or 10. You don't quote me on that, I'm going off the top of my head. But you've put away $1.9 million. The advantage to that is, as you embark on your next project, you may not have to bond as much money now, because you've been putting aside a little bit every year to help defer those costs and save interest on the future. So right now you have about $8.7 million in these reserves. Then we have what's known as assigned, and assigned is those encumbrances I spoke about earlier. Those are the purchase orders at the end of the year. You have almost $500,000 there. And you used $800,000 of your current reserve, again, to balance the budget and not levy taxes. So again, you've applied some to the future. And what that leaves you with is what's known as the unassigned. And New York State limits the school district at 4%, and that's where you are. You have $2.1 million, and that's to address emergencies that arise during the year, or again, future budget needs. So you have the maximum allowed, which is only 4%. And as people say 4%, if you go to towns and villages, they have no limit. Some of them have 10, 12% put away. Schools are limited to 4%. On the next slide, you do operate other funds. I know I spent all my time talking about the general fund, which is your main operating fund, but you do have a debt service fund. The debt service fund accumulates money that you borrowed for capital projects, and maybe the project came in slightly under budget. Well, that money is restricted, so you move it to your debt service fund, and you have to use it to pay down the debt associated with that project. Then you have your special aid fund. The special aid fund is usually a zero fund balance. This year it does happen to be negative $5,800. And that's because of timing. Part of the CARES Act allocated schools some money for summer handicap program, and that program, although you spent the money, has not yet been formally approved by the state, so it's a timing difference. So you're not allowed to record the revenue until the program's approved. But I believe the program's been approved, and I think the district has even claimed the money. Your capital projects fund shows a deficit of about $12 million. Again, that's an accounting deficit. What happens is that the district isn't allowed to record the revenue on capital project until they get permanent financing. What the district has done is they've taken advantage of the lower interest rates and issued what are known as bond anticipation notes, because you pay much less interest on those. They're one-year notes. So those don't get recorded as revenue. So you did borrow the money, you have funded and paid the projects, but you can't record that revenue until you convert it to permanent financing. Your school lunch fund has $75,000 in it. And your special purpose fund has $192,000 in it. That has grown significantly over prior years because of a change in accounting principles, whereby the old extra classroom activity fund that used to be the agency fund has been reclassified as a special purpose fund. So there's about $80,000 there that is for the extra classroom activities that the district can't use, but it has to be recorded in this fund now. And the next slide again is just informational. We talk a lot about debts and future costs. The district only has one bond currently outstanding, and that's a refunding bond that you issued back in 2015 when interest rates first dropped, and you took advantage and refunded some old debt. And then for the new project that you did, you took out an energy performance contract, and you borrowed $7 million, and you still have about 5.7. And if you look at the chart below, you'll see that all of your general obligation bonds will be done in approximately 7 years. I know it doesn't show all 7, but I looked it up. It's about 7 years. Very quick debt. That's a very aggressive debt service schedule. You should be very pleased with that. And the energy performance bond is basically paid off again within 10 years. So the district does a good job of managing its debt. I've noticed a lot of capital improvements outside, and you haven't incurred a lot of 30-year bonds to do it. So you've done a good job. And that's the year quickly in review. If anybody has any questions, Colleen and I will do our best to try to answer them.
Okay, so I asked at the meeting, but I'm going to ask you again, bottom line for us.
Bottom line is the district had a very good year. and again, in a very difficult time. As I said early on, your rules were changing almost every week. So you had to adjust and keep adjusting, and by doing so, you were able to generate a surplus. And last year, you remained very conservative by not picking up that 20% of the state aid. I mean, that was, given that the uncertainty, that was a very smart thing to do. So the district did well. A lot of districts are doing very well. So you're not really out of line with anybody if somebody thinks that this was, too good a year. A lot of districts, again, you have to plan for a full operation, and if you come in under, you come in under, but you don't want to run short.
Okay.
So I just want to emphasize that piece. The reason for the surplus this year was really, it's a difficult process to plan a budget in a normal year. Last year, we were essentially planning a budget in a vacuum. We had no idea what was happening at the state. We had no idea what's happening to the federal government. We always get state aid estimates is what we're getting. And we essentially had no number, right? So we had to take a very conservative approach, not knowing how much money we were getting from the state, and with the federal money that the state received and then passed on to the school districts, made us whole, even though we didn't start with that number, because we couldn't start with a higher number, not get the money, and then be forced to make mid-year cuts to programs and staff. That was not something we were willing to do. So we started at a conservative number, and then when all the state aid came through, that's what really generated the surplus that's a little out of norm. But it's just sort of a consequence of what was happening last year when we were planning our budget.
Okay. Anybody else?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Again, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to come back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Tom Sawyer, is he still here? Tom. Tom was just re-elected chairperson of the audit committee. He served on the, yay!
I want to know what the vote was.
Were you voluntold, Tom?
It was unanimous. He was unanimously elected. He served on the audit committee, I think, 4 or 5 years, Tom? I don't know. We've worked on the audit committee together, so I was really thrilled that he's the chairperson. So.
Best years of my life.
Yeah.
So to reiterate what Dr. Luff said, the revenue exceeded the expenditures by a good amount, and I think that's good for the district. Obviously, earning more is better than running a deficit. And I think there were 2 things that contributed to that. One was the conservative estimate going into the school year, and that was good of the board and the administration to kind of not anticipate that state aid. It's always better to get that when you're not expecting it. So they went in with a conservative estimate. I think the second reason that wasn't necessarily mentioned, and a lot of people kind of asked this, was last year, COVID, there was, why isn't the school spending less money? There's not as many people. They're not running the buildings. I think the fact of the matter is part of that excess revenue is the reduction in expenditures is the school actually did save some money. So that's why you see that kind of, it's higher than it would normally be in previous years. It's both because the school estimated conservatively and also less money was spent last year. So that is a good thing. So in reviewing the presentation, I think the board approves or the committee rather, and we hand it back to the board.
Thank you.
Questions?
And thank you for your service.
Thank you, Tom.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Tom.
All right. So now I'd like to welcome up Marie O'Connor and Kristen McConnell. They come to us from the Putnam County Communities That Care Coalition, and they're going to take us through a presentation on the 2020 Prevention Needs Assessment survey results for Putnam Valley. Welcome.
Dan, can we down the microphone?
Yeah, stand on
You're
your tippy
much
toes the
shorter
whole
than
time.
Chris.
So this is your second presentation already tonight? Or are we first?
It's our second.
It's your second, all right.
Right.
We'll expect just slightly better than the town got.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you for having us. I'm Kristen McConnell from the Prevention Council of Putnam, and I also co-chair each of the Communities That Care coalitions throughout the county, one of them being the Putnam Valley CTC, as we call it.
And my name is Marie O'Connor. I coordinate the Putnam County Communities That Care Coalition, as well as work for the Prevention Council of Putnam.
So what we're going to be going through are the results of the 2020 Prevention Needs Assessment, or what we call the PNA survey. So before we go into this, I just want to officially thank the district for participating in a year that was, an unprecedented challenge for all of us. We, for 10 years, administered this survey throughout each district in the spring of the even years. And we knew that would not happen, obviously, in April, May of 2020. And we really spent a lot of time trying to determine what to do as we approached the fall of last year. Did we want to burden you with a survey administration when there were so many unknowns? And Marie is really the liaison with each of the districts, and we were just really pleased and want to thank you for your participation during the time that we were in. So it's really important that we have this longitudinal data, and even though it was administered in the fall and not the spring, it's still really important that we keep this momentum going with all the districts every 2 years. So this administration was in the fall, like I said, of 2020, and included the students in even grade years, which we do every year. And the nice thing about, oh, can you hear me? Is it because of my mask? Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, what's happening there? I can keep going while you're doing that, or no, you don't want me to do that? So the nice thing about what happened last year, one positive, I'll try to be positive about 2020, was that we did this full electronic administration. So that's the two main differences, was the fall of 2020 instead of spring, and then all the districts, not just you, agreed to administer the survey entirely online, which meant that there were no paper pencil surveys. So what that actually resulted in was an extremely high completion rate compared to other years. So that was really nice to see the students participating more. We had actually experienced something unusual 2 years ago. We offered electronic administration in some districts, and it didn't pan out as well. So this was a really nice thing. We were really, really pleased to see the students really, maybe because they were online so much with school at that point, they trusted the internet a little more and felt comfortable that their answers were confidential. Oh, it's not working. That's okay. I can keep speaking about that slide anyway. So as was on the slide was, so last year in the fall, 355 Putnam Valley 8th, 10th, and 12th graders completed the survey, and we did a comparison in 2018, 249 completed it, so clearly a higher return rate. And throughout the county, just under 2,100 students in those respective grades completed the survey. Like I said, they're all online, and it's passive consent, which means that we provide you a letter, and you, the district sends something out to parents informing them of the survey, what it is, and the parents have to opt out their child if they don't want them to complete the survey. So the purpose of the survey, this is great because I'm going to get to that, is to assess the adolescent substance use, antisocial, and risk and protective factors. So that's what we'll focus on, because we know that those predict behavior and adolescent problems. So can I hit the back arrow, or is that going to mess up? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm, okay. So this next slide really just covers the validity and confidentiality of the survey. So students can skip questions. There is a cut point in the survey, but they don't have to actually finish the survey. They're assured it's confidential, and like I said, we were really pleased to see the return rate, particularly being in online administration. And surveys are actually eliminated when responses are determined to be dishonest. We don't evaluate these surveys. They're sent to our evaluator in Salt Lake City,
and they run them through, and there's certain honesty questions throughout the survey, and if those questions are inconsistent or answered dishonestly, their surveys are not included in the results. So we feel fairly confident in the results. Sorry. So one thing, do you have anything else before I go forward? Okay. So one thing that we just want to point out is that throughout the survey, there's 3 types of measures that are used. So for the purposes of this discussion tonight, we're focusing on what's called past 30-day use. And that's really a measure of the percentage of students that disclose using a substance at least once in the past 30 days prior to taking the survey. And it's really a more sensitive indicator of the level of current use of substance. So what I mean by that is if it asks lifetime use questions, they may have tried something once. So that's not really a sensitive indicator of consistent use. So if you look here at the past 30-day use in Putnam Valley, 2020 obviously being the furthest to the right, the lighter blue shade, you can see a significant decline in 10th grade past 30-day use of alcohol, and about leveling out for 12th grade, but we were really pleased. Another thing I just want to mention is there's really not enough data to support whether or not COVID had an impact on young people's use just yet. We heard a lot of information and a lot of reports as it was happening that adults were home more and adults were admittedly drinking more when they were under the lockdown last year, but we had a lot of concerns. We would talk amongst ourselves that because of young people and just households in general being somewhat isolated in terms of everyone's home, but everyone's behind a different door, at different floors, they have headphones, they're on different Zooms, et cetera, that there was potential for there to be an increased use in substance use because not everybody was in the same room together and there was a lot of distractions. So we were really concerned. Then we see the survey results, and you'll see throughout there actually are some significant declines in some areas, and particularly alcohol 30-day use. To see it go down that much for 10th graders is really significant. Similarly for tobacco, if you can see for 12th graders from 2018 to 2020, again a nice decline and movement in the right direction. Even though we've seen a decline with tobacco over the last 20 years with vaping, we did see a little bit of an uptick a couple of years ago, but this was a nice reduction. So now for, I mentioned e-cigarettes or vaping. Do you want to talk about this or want me to talk about it?
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question on the
Yeah.
on the trend, on the issue of is it possible, or are you looking into the sample being, because its sample is much larger than the handwritten surveys, that because you have more participation, you might have more people just in general that are answering the questions, and maybe is there any statistic validity, or is it just a coincidence that there's an increase in participation and then the decrease in certain metrics?
So that's a really good question, right? So we didn't hear from our evaluators specifically that there was any direct relationship between what you're saying, excuse me, but there could be some of that, and we're not sure in past years, because each student can opt out in the moment. They're told there's instructions they read, and we don't know why they opt out. So are they opting out because they don't want to disclose their use, or are they just opting out because they want to, make their own decision? So we're not sure who opted out and why, we had higher rate participation, and if that's actually directly related to use. But we can definitely ask our evaluators if you'd like.
Because students would have, in theory, with an online, they'd have as much time as they want to go through this survey, as opposed to being in a social studies classroom, whatever it is. They might have limited time to go through this survey.
Well, is that true though? Do they have?
I do think that there was a limit on time as far as completing the entire survey, but you do have a point. It's not to that exact 40-minute period.
Right.
So here, looking at the 30-day use of e-cigarettes, you can see here that the kids were really only surveyed for this for the first time in 2018. So you can see, according to the chart here, and I'll talk a little bit about what vaping is, but you can see, according to the chart here, the 2020 results are far greater than they were back in 2018, which we expect to see. So basically, vaping is the act of inhaling and exhaling an aerosol, often referred to as a vapor, which is produced by an e-cigarette or similar device. The term is used because e-cigarettes do not produce tobacco, but rather an aerosol, and often mistaken for water vapor that actually consists of fine particles. Many of these particles, as we know, contain varying amounts of toxic chemicals, which have been linked to cancer, as well as respiratory and heart disease. So a vape generally it consists of a mouthpiece, a battery, a cartridge, containing the e-liquid or e-juice with a heating component for the device that is powered by a battery. And when the device is used, the battery heats up the heating component, which turns the contents of the e-liquid into an aerosol. So I know, this has been a hot topic, and we see that the rates are continuing to rise. There is a national, as you see in the yellow columns there, so we are still far below the national level, which is a good thing. However, there was a reduction again, as you see in the 2020, which we can attribute to the fact that the kids were not as much congregating in school bathrooms or doing it, publicly, because there was not gatherings.
Right.
I just point out there that the Putnam Valley number significantly dropped, but the national numbers significantly increased. I think that speaks a lot to our community and the efforts and the awareness of our parents and their school employees. If to see that large of a jump from the national numbers coincide with a drop in the numbers in Putnam Valley, I think is just an impressive statement for our community and our students. So I didn't want to let that pass without making that note.
Definitely. This was, again, pleasant surprise. Numbers are going in the right direction. And like you said, compared to the national counterparts, Putnam Valley is doing very, very well. So past 30-day use of marijuana, a very hot topic these days. So as you can see from past years, particularly in 12th grade, it's pretty much leveled out since 2012. Around 1 in 3 students admitting that completed the survey admitting to using marijuana in the past 30 days. That's not uncommon across the county. But then what we were pleased with, especially for 12th graders, is to see the decline that you can see that from the past, from 2018. 10th grade remained about the same, but with everything that's happening in our state and nationally with related to marijuana, there are young people get such a mixed message. It's just been an uphill battle for a really long time. And we just weren't seeing a lot of movement, and now to see Putnam Valley 12th graders, which is the highest users, when you're looking at the 3 grades, to see them decline like that, we were really pleased. And again, we don't know if we can attribute some of that to everyone being home and it being more difficult to conceal the smell and using, or what. That's like what remains still a little unknown. That will take some time for us to find out. So binge drinking, I can see it was 0 actually this year, which is really nice for 8th grade. So I'll read the question so everyone understands from the survey. Think back over the last 2 weeks. How many times have you had 5 or more alcoholic drinks in a row? So that's what's defined as binge drinking. Again, something that's really serious, really significant numbers throughout the region, throughout the state, not just Putnam County or in Putnam Valley, to see these numbers. But if you look back to where we started surveying in 2008, being at almost 40% of 12th graders that completed the survey admitting that, down to 2020. I mean, that's, again, really, really pleased, and even 10th graders as well, to see that decline. We were seeing a nice decline in 12th grade. After a little bit of an uptick in 2016, we were seeing, a decline in 2018, but now we're down to 20% that completed it, which again is really, really nice to see.
So again, on the sample size, or the sample, if I'm reading this correctly, essentially the 2016 eighth graders are now the 2020s.
Yes,
12th graders.
Yes.
So if we follow those lines, we're getting the cohorts, not necessarily the same exact
Kids,
students,
right.
but the same cohorts, correct?
That's correct, yes. I can tell you like data. So the reason why binge drinking is really concerning just across the board is because we know any alcohol use for young people impacts their brain. Their brain is not fully developed to age 23 to 25, so any substance use, any alcohol use is problematic, and they're more likely to develop an addiction later on in life if the younger that they start. But binge drinking also has a lot of other risks like alcohol poisoning and other serious consequences. So this is a more serious type of underage drinking that we bring up because it's really important that we're aware of it.
If I can just add
course.
one quick anecdotal piece of data. When we've talked to kids in focus groups throughout the county, one of the comments that we often hear is that, well, when we drink, we binge drink. That's what we do. We don't go out to casually have a beer with friends and, hang out and, watch a game. When we drink purposely to get drunk.
Yeah, that's a good point. So then past 3-day use of other drugs. So this is important. I'll explain that the way the questions are worded use prescription stimulants or amphetamines not prescribed to you, because we know that young people are prescribed these drugs. So it's very much clear in the survey. Use, again, and they give examples, Ritalin, Adderall, use prescription sedatives or sleep not prescribed to you. And they give examples, tranquilizers such as Xanax, Valium, things like that. So it's very clear that the drugs that they are, if they're answering yes, it's not a prescription that was prescribed to them. So, and then inhalants. So again, these are very small numbers, but we still like to point them out because we want them all to be zero. So, but if you look, you can see that was pointed out here. No inhalant use in 2016 and a very small amount in 2020. So now we're going to just shift a little bit to perception of risk. So the way I like to explain perception of risk is if you perceive something to be risky or harmful, you're less likely to, ideally, you think you're less likely to use that. So there's characteristics of risk factors for school, community, family environments, as well as students and their peer groups. They are known to predict likelihood of use and other things like school dropout, delinquency, teen pregnancy, violent behavior, things like that. And then there's the other side of the coin, which are protective factors that exert a positive influence or buffer against those negative risk factors, which then would reduce the likelihood of adolescents engaging in problem behaviors. So the premise of this approach is that in order to promote positive youth development and prevent problem behavior, it's necessary to address these factors that predict the problem behavior. So we've teased out the drugs that we just spoke about: alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, prescription drugs. The reason why prescription drugs doesn't date back into 2008 is just because it wasn't measured in the survey until things really became problematic in about 2012, and then it was added to the survey in 2014. So you can see here, so you want perception of risk to be high. Like I said, so for example, you see tobacco was actually declining over time, which was a concern because we know that for 20 years, tobacco, it was a great job that was done to really get kids to young people to be to perceive tobacco to be very risky and harmful to their bodies. And then you can see now in 2020, it rose up again, which was really, really nice. Prescription drugs continues to go up, again, probably because people hear and see of what can potentially happen with overdoses, et cetera. So And then marijuana has always sort of been that one that we struggle with because, again, of a lot of outside influences that are not, beyond our control. However, it was nice to see in 2018 and 2020, I mean, you're not seeing a whole significant difference here, the perception of risk to increase a little bit. So then we focus on another risk factor we've been looking at for the last 10 years, perception of parental disapproval. And this is important because if a young person believes their parents disapprove, they might be less likely to engage in that behavior. The e-cigs was added just this year as well, right? So we were really pleased the survey developer added vapes and e-cigarettes. So you can see we don't have any baseline, but we do have it for 2020 all the way to the right. So you want these to be high. The only really area that we're disappointed but not entirely surprised with what's going on. Obviously, you can see marijuana, the perception of parental disapproval dropped significantly from 2016 and 18.
What is the question asked for that one?
I don't have that question here. I knew someone was going to ask me that, and I said, "Oh, I didn't put it on here for some reason." We can get that for you. We can get that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are actually probably a bunch of questions, not just one, but we'll get them to you. We can actually get you the entire survey to look at.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about this one?
So another area that we look at is perception of peer disapproval and their overall results of that. Young people who associate with peers who engage in substance use are much more likely to engage themselves in the same behavior. So peer drug use has consistently been found to be among the strongest predictors of substance use among youth. Even when young people come from well-managed families and do not experience other risk factors, spending time with friends who use drugs greatly increases the risk of that problem developing. So here, looking at this survey, if you look at the comparisons, there really wasn't much change over the past 4 years in the prescription drug area. So that all remained pretty high. Really, this particular study here, I mean, is pretty consistent. And, we see that marijuana actually rose a bit from 2018, which was a good result to see. And alcohol, tobacco stayed pretty much the same.
So then, again, for risk factors overall, so here we also know that there's research that supports that legal restrictions on alcohol or tobacco have been followed by a decrease in consumption. So an example of that would be like the availability or access of alcohol can be related to the use or abuse by young people. So, and then let me explain antisocial behaviors, which is parental attitudes. So the third risk factor on the right, the full name is parental attitudes favorable toward antisocial behavior, is really a measure of the percentage of students who report any involvement in the past year with 2 antisocial behaviors listed, and we can get you the survey. So when we're looking at reporting risk, so laws and norms, the first one I'll explain, laws and norms that are favorable toward drug use. So that's what that is, availability of drugs and parental attitudes favorable toward antisocial behavior, which would include drug use. So you could see for laws and norms favorable, it's actually nice to see it going down. When we started the survey, 10 years ago or 12 years ago, and it was higher, and we were talking to kids and just kind of try to understand like what their perception, because the perception for young people is a reality, even if we don't believe it to be true. The analogy that I would give to colleagues was it's a Class A misdemeanor to steal a shopping cart from a supermarket, and it's a violation to get caught with marijuana. It's like a $50 fine. So that was so that's an example of a law or a norm in a culture, a norm in a community where they might look at it and say it's really not a big deal if I get caught with weed, but it's a class A misdemeanor, you're arrestable charge to steal a shopping cart. So that's what I mean when we look at like laws and norms. That's the example that I give. So do you want to talk about protective? Sure. Okay.
So this is always a better vibe, the protective
Yes,
factors.
it's positive.
Positive. Okay, so parents, siblings, and other family members, when they praise their kids, encourage them to attend to things done well by their child, children are, of course, less likely to engage in substance use and other problem behaviors. So rewards for positive participation in activities helps youth bond to the community, thus lowering the risk for substance use. When young people are recognized for their contributions at school, they're less likely to be motivated to be involved in substance use and other problem behaviors. So if you take a look at this graph here, there's 3 different categories: the family rewards, community rewards, and school rewards. And you can see that they really haven't changed much, with a little bit of a raise in 2020 for positive factors in all 3 areas, which was nice to see.
Yeah, school especially.
Yep, school especially, if you see that. And remember that seeing the raising of that, the increase is good here in this category.
Yes. Let's put that on there. Okay. And then gambling. So we include gambling because over time our agencies receive some small gambling prevention funds, and we've worked with school districts and throughout the community, and we felt there is research to support gambling as an antisocial risky behavior that can be connected to using substances. So, and all things considered here, especially in 2020 with the use of online gambling, significant decline here across the board. I mean, to see 12th graders drop that much in a time where they're online as much as they are, and it isn't as difficult as we probably think it is to access online gambling, to see these declines, I mean, continue to pretty much go in the right direction. This was really nice to see. Oh, there we go. Do you want to do this? Okay. It wasn't working. Oh, I think you skipped it. Did I skip it? The button got stuck. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Oopsie. Oh, this one. Oh, there's not much to say about this one. Sorry. So we like to just explain age of onset. I talked a little earlier about that someone starts to use a substance, the more risk they're at to develop a problem later on in life. So the age that someone begins is called age of onset, and we want that to be later. So I just put the details are in the full report of the survey, but throughout Putnam Valley in the 8th, 10th, and 12th grade, age of onset has gotten later from 20 to when we began inception in 2008 to 2020, which is a really good thing. Sorry about that.
So alcohol and driving. We always really like to take a look at this because we all know how very dangerous this can be. So in 2020, the results were 0.9% of students in grades 8, 10, and 12 reported they have driven after drinking alcohol, slightly increased from 2018, where we saw 0.4%. As far as an explanation to that, it could very well be that, it's a slight increase, right? So, it could be that there were more people participating this time around, as to the gentleman's comment earlier, that we see that kind of increase. In 2020, the result was 6.8% of students in grades 8, 10, and 12 had reported they had been in a car with someone who had been drinking. And this is a decrease from 2018 result, which was 18.2. So that's really quite, a decrease. And again, in 2020, we saw our kids being far less likely to be in a car with their peers. So again, we can contribute possibly some of that to COVID. But here below, you can see 2020 versus the 2018, looking at 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. And what we see here is 8th grade, 6.0% had stated that they had driven in a car, as opposed to 17.2, so the nice decrease there. In 10th grade, 9.7 as compared to 20.9%, so a pretty significant decrease there. And then in 2020, looking at the 12th grade, 4.9 compared to 15%. So decreases across the board, which is nice to see.
And Putnam Valley participates in the Simulated Impaired Driving Experience program over the summer, and we really Marie's very involved with that, and it really addresses both distracted, drunk, and impaired driving, and all of that in several different components. And so we actually share these results with the students in that training, and talk to them about that. So.
But I think we have to not be complacent because people weren't in course
Exactly.
in general.
Right.
So I'm hoping there was a decrease because of education, but I'm sure the significant numbers is partially because the
We
quarantine.
feel the same, right? There are definitely some assumptions that we've drawn, and like I said, some of this is too early to really know. But I'm glad that I was proven wrong when I was worried that kids were using at home more. So I'm glad that.
When Kristen and I first saw the results, we did like a
Yeah.
ah.
Yeah. So because
that was
we
good
didn't know
news.
what to think last year. So about everything was just there was just so much going on for everybody, and it was such a difficult time for everyone. Families, young people, their mental health, their physical health, everything. So. All that said, we were really pleased as we looked over the survey, and we really commend Putnam Valley. You're constantly, you work really well with us. Like I said, you worked with us and did the survey in a pandemic. We know that you have so many competing priorities, and it just shows that this is one of them. So thank you so much for continuing to work with us, and we will send the full report to you as well as a copy of the survey. You can actually see what it looks like. It will look a little different than online, but it's the same questions. So, thanks.
Marie, before you go,
Yeah.
The Putnam Valley chapter of the Communities That Care, are we going to meet in person this year? Or are we meeting online? Like what? Because I'd like to do like a public service, like if anybody wants to join the Communities That Care Coalition, like how to do that.
Oh yes, yes. That. Yeah.
So the Putnam Valley Communities That Care Coalition meets bi-monthly, so every other month. We'll have our first meeting in October. We would love for any community members to get involved. Parents are always welcome to get involved. We love to when students come on board and get involved. But it'd be terrific if we can have some further response. Meetings will still be on Zoom. But again, that seems to work for people. It seems to be more convenient for people. We generally meet at a 3:00 time. And
You can include that in the email if you want.
yeah, we can include more details in an email to you guys.
Yeah, just a thing so we could send out a blast so people would know who to contact and how to join if they want to join that committee. Great, thanks.
Coming from Barbara, who's been a member for many years, so thank you.
A quick question. Are you going to continue to field the survey in the fall, or are you going to switch back to the spring?
We're going to continue with fall administration. Actually, it can be more beneficial to do it in the fall because it's earlier in the year and the students identify more in the grade they're in. We started in the spring many years ago, and then we learned that like for a 10th grader, it's like they're in their minds that they're practically an 11th grader. So.
And the same thing for seniors,
Yeah.
when you're assessing
Right, they're leaving.
in the
so.
spring, they're leaving.
Right.
So it's really, the data is not as critical as it would be if we did it
Right.
early in the year.
But it wouldn't be this year, this is an
No.
odd year, so it would be
Right,
next year.
exactly.
I know in the full report, it goes, it kind of shows the regions area, the 6 school districts in the county and the state, correct? Do you have any findings? Because that would be a tool that we would use to see if, for whatever reason, there might be a difference in opinions or actions based on the programming that we have here in the school district as opposed to other school districts.
Were there any?
Are there any findings at this point on
Not
how
yet.
we fare?
Not that we've seen.
Not that we've seen.
No. There doesn't typically, there's not a lot of variation typically throughout the various school districts. But this year, we had so much more participation that you never know. But we will, we're always looking, and it seems that even when we make these changes or these reductions are in the right direction, we still feel like more work needs to be done, just like you said, because we don't want to get complacent and think like just because we see a reduction in drinking and driving or being in the car with someone who's intoxicated doesn't mean that if we stop talking about it or shift to something else, then that there's potential for that to increase. So we're really going to always focus on, no matter what, alcohol, marijuana, tobacco. They're the big three that are indicators of use and moving on to other substances later in life. But we are definitely going to consider, if we see something unusual, looking at how we can address that. So.
And, you know, it may seem coincidental or odd that a conversation about budget and finance and money is right before this, and it's not at all. Because it is coincidental, but there is a connection in terms of connections. Mental health is my field. How many times have we heard everybody needs to be positively connected with at least one thing, one person, one cause, one interest, and that's how we get these better results.
Right.
So they're really very connected, and a lot of what we do in this district is to continue to make sure these numbers go down when they're supposed to go down and go up when they're supposed to go up. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to ask so many questions. The thrust of the survey is behaviors related to risky behavior, in this case substances. Is there a different survey that is other behaviors? I'm thinking of violence, sexual abuse, that type of thing.
Some of that's included in here when we send the full report, and it has some of those risk factors like depression and things like that are in there, right?
Thank you.
Dominic, just from a student's perspective, is there something that just you have a sense that we could do better, or in terms of encouraging or rewarding positive behaviors? I hate to put you on the spot, but you know you.
That's okay. Thank
but
you.
I'm going to do it anyway. No.
I think especially for the seniors, it's being treated with respect like an adult. No one likes being talked down to. So ensuring that you give them point blank the risks and what they can do to counteract any risk factors is most likely the best solution to ensure that the seriousness is understood.
And that would filter down even to, lowly juniors, not just the seniors, right?
Well, I can't speak for the other grades as much.
So you're saying instead of saying, don't do this, here's the dangers, here's the risk, make an informed decision, we're treating you with respect, and that works.
I believe, although that's really anecdotal, that would possibly be more effective, to include, such phrasing or such motion of respect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your time. I know it's a very long evening for you.
No
but
problem.
thank
Happy
you
to
both.
be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the next item on our agenda is a presentation, is actually a second reading of our Title IX sexual harassment policy. We had a first reading last meeting. Really the changes are more material resource based as opposed to simply defining what it is. Now there's a very defined process in which one would file forms, how those forms are routed, who they go to. This is all in line with recommendations made by New York State as well as our attorney's office. So I don't know if there's any specific questions after the first reading last meeting, but if not, this resolution, this will come up as a resolution later in the meeting.
No.
Nothing?
No?
I
Okay.
do see Matt was added, Dr. Matt Mello.
Yep, so we traditionally like to have both a male and a female representative, depending upon who is making accusations, and Mr. Matt Mello has been identified as the male Title IX representative for the district.
And it did seem that most of the revisions were procedural than substantial.
Okay, so if there's nothing on that, I'm going to turn it over to our student rep, Dominic. I welcome you. I don't know if you have something you'd like to share in your first meeting?
Well, First off, I'd like to thank Dr. Luft and thank the entire board here for treating me like a board member and for being so welcoming and professional in this such environment. And well, thank you. The only event that I can report on is the homecoming dance, which is on October 16th from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. And a 9-student committee has been selected, which will first meet on September 24th to decide such things as budget, decorations, photo booth heaters, and a possible change in location to an outside area to allow no masks, so that we have more of a safe environment. But other than that, nothing to report.
Is it nice to be back in school?
Yes, oh yes. I enjoy being able to see my peers, my friends I weren't able to be in contact with as much. So having a more set schedule with teachers being supportive at every step of the way, it's just a great feeling. It's great to be back.
We love having you back.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'll jump into my report. It's pretty quick this evening. I would like to begin again by welcoming and thanking our student board reps. I think, Dominic, you'll quickly realize the more controversial the topic, the more eyes that will be pointed at you or your other students. Everyone is always anxiously awaiting to hear the student perspective. So we hope that yourself, as well as your other student reps, Leanne Keeler and Amanda Orlando, feel comfortable participating, speaking on behalf of students, and really being as engaged and involved in this meeting as you are comfortable being so, because people very much value your thoughts and opinions and want to hear the voice of students. So thank you for your time and taking this on, and we're looking forward to having you and other students with us throughout the year. Just some quick events. Many are aware, elementary school held their back to school evenings, and we were very thrilled to be able to host them in person. Very, very few school districts in the region had in-person back to school nights, but we really thought it was important to provide parents the opportunity to get back into the classrooms, meet with our teachers, and really experience the students' experience each day. So elementary school was 9, 13, and 14. Middle school was yesterday and today. They just wrapped up. And the high school is scheduled for 9:30. We also had our elementary school back to school picnic in partnership with the PTA. That took place on 9/17, and attendance was terrific. And our new athletic director, David Kantrowitz, held his first virtual back to sports night on 9/14, which again was well attended by parents. Yesterday we held a board retreat. We had an opportunity to work with a couple of consultants, discussing topics such as roles, responsibilities, communication, board decorum, and other things. We held our first after-school professional development session, and Ms. Levine was instrumental in making that a reality, and that work focused on the implementation of Writing Revolution. This is a new writing program across all buildings and content areas. I had an update for the Stadesi Elementary School Assistant Principal, but as many heard, we just hired one. So I welcome Jennifer Pico, and we're looking forward to having her join our team. A quick COVID update. Since schools have opened, we've had 6 cases of COVID, 3 in staff members, 3 in students. Those have resulted in a total of 46 quarantines, but I do want to point out, of those 46, 17, round about 17 were from classroom exposures, so individuals within classrooms. And a vast majority of those quarantines stemmed from bus transmissions, Children's Center, which we're going to work closely with the Children's Center to figure out how to collectively reduce the number of students exposed in that location, lunch, and other out-of-school activities. Some other upcoming events. The high school is hosting its financial aid night, which is always well attended. That's tomorrow. We have our emergency dismissal, which is 15 minutes early on October 8th. October 12th, schools and offices are closed, and 10/23 to 10/29 is the middle school Red Ribbon Week. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, board members, anybody have questions for Dr. Love?
Just a quick question about the quarantine. the quarantining meaning the exposure of the 3 feet or less, not that the spreading is happening in the classroom, but that the students who have been identified as having been exposed are within the classroom.
Correct. So as many are aware, we were able to reduce for in-class only exposures from 6 feet to 3 feet, which really leads to fewer exposures within any classroom. Typically, students are 3 feet apart, as well as they're wearing a mask. Some of those exposures were in classes where students typically do not wear masks for medical reasons. In some cases, we have snack. We alternate snack in a way so fewer students have their masks off at any one time or limit the amount of time that masks are off. But obviously, there's instances we want students working in partner groups. We want students returning to the type of education that we know is beneficial to students. So there's occasionally going to be instances for in-class exposures, but a vast majority of quarantines stem from outside of class activities, transportation, lunch, extracurriculars. And that's what we anticipate going into the year.
Okay, so new business. Number 2.
Resolve the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the second reading of the revision of policy 113, Title IX, student sexual harassment as per document number 6522, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Question? Sorry.
Do I
go ahead.
second first? Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The resolution passes. Number 3, please.
Resolved to accept the fiscal external audit report as presented to the board at this meeting, including extra classroom activity funds completed by PFK O'Connor Davies, the independent auditors for the district, and the district response corrective action plan management and representation letters for the fiscal year ending June 2021, as per document number 66/22, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Resolution passes. Number 4, please.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve supplemental memorandums of agreement with the Putnam Valley Federation of Teachers as per the noted document numbers, documents attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting, the SMOA related to surveillance cameras in certain public locations that may, at times, constitute teachers' classrooms, document number 62/22, SMOA related to the sick leave accruals converted to COVID-19 quarantine days, document number 63/22.
Second?
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The resolution passes. Number 5, please.
Resolved to approve and authorize the superintendent of schools to enter into a supplemental memorandum of agreement with the CSEA related to sick leave accruals converted to COVID-19 quarantine days as per document number 64/22 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Resolution passes. Number 6, please.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation of Richard Mansfield, a cleaner from the district, effective the close of business on September 24th, 2021, as per document number 6822, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Resolution passes. Number 7, please.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation for the purpose of retirement of Patricia Van de Velde, a teacher from the district, effective the close of business on January 14th, 2022, as per document number 69/22, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
Hopefully, we'll this year be able to have the real celebration
An
to
in-person
honor our
acknowledgement.
retirees and our tenure folks. But both my daughters have had Ms. Van de Velde, and she's been great for our district, and
Reading these are always bittersweet.
Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Resolution passes. Number 8, please.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation of Karen Geyer, a teaching assistant from the district, effective the close of the business day on June 30th of 2022, as per document 70/22, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second?
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Resolution passes. Number 9, please.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation for purpose of retirement of Kelly Thompson, a teacher from the district, effective the close of business on June 30th, 2022, as per document number 71/22, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
I just want to collectively thank all of them, Rich Mansfield, Pat Vandeveld, Karen Geyer, and Kelly Thompson, for their many, many years of dedicated service to the students here in Putnam Valley. I wanted to do the total math for the number of years of service, but I'm going to estimate well over 60 years of service between the 4 of them to the students of Putnam Valley. So I wish them all the best of luck in retirement and thank them.
Agree.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Resolution passes. So, upcoming topics of board meetings, presentations.
So, our next board meeting is scheduled, we're back to Thursdays, October 7th. And the agenda for that meeting is our elementary school update on the opening of schools, as well as the NYSBA convention resolutions. The following board meeting will be October 21st, 2021. That meeting will include updates from both the middle school and the high school. And there's 2 topics at the board's request that will be scheduled in the near future. Presentation on the high school seal of civic readiness and a presentation on the middle school bridge program, which has replaced the Safe Kids program. Is there anything else that the board would like added to the presentation agenda?
I think that's good.
Can't think of anything right now.
I think those will be good. Okay. Now I'm opening up the meeting for public comments on any topic. I will ask if you come to the podium that you state your name clearly. If I don't hear it clearly, I'll ask you to repeat it just so that we have it correctly in the records. So the floor is open for public comments on any topic. No? Go ahead.
We're such a polite audience.
Margaret Brown.
Pick the, there you go. Thank you.
Margaret Brown. I'd like to discuss the COVID restrictions and quarantining. Of those students that were quarantined, I'd like to know what the proper process for notifying their parents is. I'm hearing lots of confusion, people that are told they're quarantined by other students that haven't got confirmation from the school, haven't been properly notified. The notification seems to take several days. It's a 10-day quarantine. If it's from the date, it should be from the date of exposure, not the date the school gets around to telling you were exposed. And it seems there's a lapse in. Quarantine is not effective if the student was exposed and then is here for 5 days and then told they were exposed. It doesn't make sense. I'm hearing from a lot of people that that is what's happening here. And I also would like to know, of those quarantined students, how many of them were vaccinated? Can someone tell me?
Sorry, do you have other questions? I can answer all the questions. I was just waiting.
Of the students that were quarantined, how many of them were vaccinated?
Okay, so I'll answer all the questions. So the way the reporting works, and it's a very consistent practice across all 3 buildings, is An email is sent out to parents if it's timely. If it's not, if we don't have time to notify parents via email, we reasonably think that they'll read the email. Parents are called directly. So in some cases, parents were called immediately. It was late at night. We didn't expect them to see the email. In other cases, when there's time to identify the students early, we send an email template that it tells the parents exactly what's happening. That email explains simply, the district has no authority to quarantine students. So what the email states is, it's our belief that your child has been exposed to someone who tested positive. Your information is being forwarded to the Department of Health, and it's our anticipation that the Department of Health will issue a quarantine order, which comes along with case investigation and everything that the Department of Health does. So I think the lapse is sometimes caused by when we find out that there's a positive case. Many times an individual is tested, they may not get the test results for several days. Sometimes the school doesn't find out, we get notified by the DOH. But I can tell you, anyone that's identified as a contact is either, if they're in the building, they're immediately asked to be picked up by a parent. If they're supposed to be quarantined and they didn't get the message and they show up, they're immediately turned around and asked to be picked up by a parent. And under no circumstances do we have students who should otherwise be quarantined that we're aware of in the building. I just want to correct one thing. The 10 days begins with the date of last exposure. So the last time that child was exposed to the positive case is when the clock starts. That's the information that we send to the DOH. They certainly have the right to alter that date depending upon their own investigation.
So there seems to be a lapse in the Department of Health then, talking to parents and the school, like nobody's following through with it. At least at the high school level, I know of high school students that were notified, but their parents were not.
Yeah, the emails of the high school go directly to the high school parents, not to the students.
Okay. And then my second question was, how many of the students that are quarantined have been vaccinated?
As per New York State, vaccinated children, as long as they remain asymptomatic, do not need to vaccinate.
Okay.
Do not need to quarantine.
So can we acknowledge that vaccinated students, teachers, any person can transmit COVID just the same as unvaccinated people?
Again, I'm not a public health official, so I can't speak to the magnitude in which they can pass it on.
The answer is yes. Yes, they can.
So can I answer my own questions, or are you going to answer them for me?
Plenty last time, so go ahead.
So I could say, as of Monday, in our report with the Putnam County Department of Health, of all positive cases across the county, 20% were vaccinated individuals, 80% were unvaccinated.
Okay, so
that's the information I have.
Those 20% are still vaccinating. So what is being done in our state, in our county, in our school is discriminating against people with the freedom of choice to choose whether or not to get vaccinated. And our school sitting here and standing for this discrimination against students is just plain wrong. You are here to protect our kids and to make sure everyone is treated fairly. Plain and simple. And you say you have to do what the Department of Health says, and I get that. Have you written them any letters? Have you expressed any problems? Have you let them know that this isn't fair, that you're being forced to discriminate against students?
I raise concerns to the Department of Health every single week during my weekly call with them, so yes.
I appreciate that then, thank you.
My name is Holly Davis. Good evening, Dr. Luff and members of the Board of Ed. I spent 15 years living in Putnam Valley, and I'm so unbelievably disheartened about what's going on in our local school districts. I am the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty in Westchester County. Moms for Liberty is a non-for-profit organization that is pairing parents across the U.S., helping advocate for children and parental rights in education. We need to bridge the gap between communities and the schools. We believe in freedom of choice, accountability, transparency with the districts and the community. There must be a mutual respect for parents, students, educators, and staff. I am proud to be able to here tonight to advocate for the children. To begin with, let's imagine if your child was taught to feel guilty and ashamed of the color of their skin. Obviously, common sense would tell you that this would be very detrimental to a child's overall well-being. DEI, or whatever your district wants to refer to it as, is a product of the CRS framework from the New York State Department of Education. Its implementation is optional. With that being said, Is it safe to say that you should have been openly discussed with residents, taxpayers, parents, and students of PV school districts beforehand? This framework is a curriculum focuses on ideologies that are taught in the home. It's not the responsibility of school or educators to teach. It absolutely has nothing to do with academics and is being banned from teaching across the U.S. Children are in school to taught how to think, not what to think. DEI is a politically motivated agenda to indoctrinate our children under the disguise of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This all sounds great on the surface, but parents are all over are banding together and educating themselves to know the truth. All surrounding districts in the midst of COVID conveniently had similarities. A petition to push the agenda. The district created a task force, hired a consulting firm, maybe even had a BLM march, all while probably thinking parents wouldn't notice or pay attention. The Board of Ed and superintendents of these school districts should be ashamed of themselves for the deceitful and abusive acts for our children. As quoted from Martin Luther King, "Don't judge a person by the color of their skin, but instead the content of their character." This framework in the curriculum will only promote more bullying, more hate, more divisiveness. If it was so great, why hide it from parents and the community? In Yorktown this past year, I have watched a beautiful community become divided, a town become full of hate, and a district become submissive to only one side of the community's views, all because the lack of transparency, accountability, and the framework implementation. DEI is going to take away from our students' valuable, authentic learning time. More than ever, we should be focusing on math, English, writing, science, and real history. Every single student is in school to thrive to the best of their abilities, and the role of an educator is to support them individually through teaching them academics, not an ideology based on race as its focal point. Children are in school to excel academically, artistically, athletically to the best of their abilities. The role of the educational system in this country is to lift as many boundaries as possible for every individual student, not throw imaginary boundaries in front of them that highlight or focus on their differences and force them to internalize guilt or make them feel like they were ashamed of who they are. I will leave you with this. Alveda King said when she said we were all equal, we are all human beings. What many school district and educators do not realize is that teaching this is an absolute misuse of their educational platform. It is unconstitutional and abusive to our children. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. So while I can't speak for other districts, I can certainly speak for Putnam Valley. And our DEI work in Putnam Valley will be guided by the priorities set by a group of 40 parents who are already gathered and did that work, by our educators and our students, and all of that will be collated by a committee composed of parents, teachers, and students that will decide on what DEI work will look like here in Putnam Valley. So I know there's a lot out there. There's a CRS framework, there's lots of other things, but I'm speaking for Putnam Valley and what our work will be. Our work will be driven by the priorities set by our group of parents, that work's already been done, by our educators, that work's already been done, by our students, that work is underway, and a committee comprised of all of those constituents will take all of that information and decide what our focus will be for the year. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tommy Straub, and I'm a senior at Putnam Valley High School. I feel that it's my job as a senior to help the little kids, and I feel like how some of the teachers in our school pushing political agendas in our classrooms is not okay. In room 117, that is a Spanish room that is accompanied by 2 teachers, has Black Lives Matter posters in Spanish that I feel is not okay for kids who are very impressionable. I have a little sister who is 14 years old. She's a freshman in this school. I feel like since she is a freshman and 14 years old and is a mile away from being even able to vote, she should not be able to see those. She's very energetic, and I think in the classroom, teachers should remain exempt from their political agendas. I grew up in this district. I grew up in this district since kindergarten, and I have never had a problem with the school until the past 6 months. Whether you're on the left side or the right side, I think we can all agree that it is not up to the teachers to decide what kids should think. Thank you.
So Tom, I want to thank you for coming up. I know it's not easy to do, to stand up and speak in front of all these people. And I want to say, I agree with you 100%. It is not any one of our teachers' jobs to push their own political views upon anyone. And it is my full understanding that they know the right way to teach and to teach both sides and allow individuals to make informed decisions. And if you experience that not being the case, or if any of the parents here experience that not being the case, I think the right step is to reach out to the teacher and have a conversation with the teacher. And if you feel as if the teacher is expressing their political views towards students, that warrants a conversation. And it starts with the teacher and goes to the principal. Everyone, you're not going to find a person here who disagrees with the statement that teachers should not be pushing their own political views upon students.
No.
Excuse me.
If you want to speak, you have to go.
My name's Austin Kilduff. I have two children in elementary school. Why is there a BLM poster in the school? Isn't that a racist group, terrorist group?
I would say while BLM has many people feel many different things about it, it comes down to a conversation about censorship and what we allow teachers to display or students to display and what we allow them to wear and not to wear. And it's certainly a conversation that other districts have had. You may have read in the news, there's districts that have outlawed the thin blue line. You can't wear a mask, you can't wear a shirt, you can't wear a sign, can't have a parking spot painted with there. I don't personally think that we're there. I don't think that this community needs that level of censorship where we're going to tell people what they can believe and what they think. I think what we teach in the classroom is very different. But I think individual beliefs are what they are, and individuals have the right to sort of display what their beliefs are. If we want to have a larger conversation about what should and should not be censored, we could do that, but it's not going to please either side. Nobody's going to win in the end, and it's going to make a mockery of our district, and we're going to end up on the news, and there's going to be protests, and there's going to be everything else, just like that happened in other school districts that went down this path. So I just don't feel that it is a wise path for Putnam Valley to take, to start censoring what people can wear and what they can and what they can say and what they can and what they can hang up and what they can't, because then where does it end? Who can wear a shirt with a thin blue line? Who can wear a shirt with says BLM? Who can hang this? It starts a snowball effect of now we're constantly policing who's wearing what, who's saying what, who's doing what. And I just don't think that's sort of the democratic society we live in. I think individuals could have their own beliefs. I think those beliefs can be separate than what we teach in the classroom. And that's where we are right now.
Okay. I don't know how or where you get your rules from, but who says that the masks have to be worn all day? I mean, I was just told today by my 9-year-old daughter that when she's eating, after she takes a bite, she has to put her mask back on. That's completely ridiculous.
So, sorry, I thought you were done.
And, you know, when's it going to end? Is anybody doing any research on how the masks are affecting children? They're, health-wise, emotionally, physically. It's dehumanizing them.
So the masks are required by New York State, DOH. That's not a district decision.
Is there a way that the parents of this district could vote against them?
No. I'm not a public health official. I'm not a public health expert. I do not make public health decisions, right? There are people at the state level and the county level who have educations and degrees and experience who make those decisions. If they change those decisions, I'm happy to follow. But it's not a local school board decision, it's not a superintendent decision, it's not a parent decision at this time. It comes down from the state, and that's what it is. To address your question about eating, if your child's being told that they have to put their mask on between bites, then as a parent, I think you have the full right to reach out to the school district and say, is this really an expectation? That's not my expectation. I do not expect kids to put a mask on in between bites. I think that's
Okay, so
a little much.
if I got a doctor's note, would my daughter or son be exempt from wearing the mask?
If you can get a medical exemption, it's reviewed by our school physician, and there are people who have medical exemptions.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'm Abigail O'Brien. I'm a parent of 3 children in the elementary school. So that teacher, the Spanish teacher in question that had that sign in her classroom, I have a real big problem with her Facebook profile, when you look at her profile, that you can see, I don't conform, I wear a different uniform. And what is that saying? What is she not conforming to, and having that in her classroom? I have a problem. I'm not sure what was done or what disciplinary action was taken, or if anything was happening with this teacher. And at first I thought it was told that it wasn't our school that the sign was posted in. I went to school here, I saw the picture before it was posted in the video. It was the school. But the sign in the classroom and her Facebook saying, I don't conform, I wear a different uniform, that doesn't sound like a teacher not sharing any kind of political affiliation or pushing any sort of agenda to me. But that's just my opinion as a parent. Thank you.
You gotta come to the mic if you're gonna talk about it. The district obviously has no control over individuals' personal social media accounts. Zero legal, I can't do anything about what an individual writes on their personal social media account. So I would advise people against making political statements or anything of the such, but no one in this district is under any obligation to follow my recommendations about what they do in their own personal lives or on their own personal social media. There's lots I would love to go delete, but it's not my authority. You can come back up again. You just had to come up to the mic, sorry.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So you had said that outside of the classroom is different from inside the classroom, or? Okay.
In terms of quarantines?
No, in terms of the poster, just out of curiosity. I mean, we hold, you know why? Because we hold our police officers, MTA officers, we hold all these other professions accountable for what they do. And an educational platform is very detrimental to children. And I would think inside the classroom would be non-biased of political affiliations or views, just from opposed to all different professions where you can't even do things on social media. So forget about your job, you can't do things on social media. So I was just wondering about that, like how it works.
I mean, I think the conversation about censorship is broader than just the classroom.
Okay.
It would be what individuals are wearing, right? What's painted in our parking spots, what's said by individuals, right? You only have so much ability to control what people are wearing, right? So if I'm gonna force someone with a BLM shirt to take that shirt off because they walk into school with it, do I have the same obligation for a student wearing a thin blue line? Now, you may feel, no, that's not the same, and there could be 100 reasons why. But there will be other parents who will come in here and give me 100 reasons why it's not fair for one and not the other.
Well,
so I would
shirt
prefer
for a
to
student
not.
is different from like I said, a teacher, an educator.
So an educator with a poster of a thin blue line in the classroom.
An educator would have to, just like I wouldn't expect a flag of anything but the American flag in the classroom. I mean, I just don't understand, like, the reasoning behind that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Our world language classrooms have multiple flags hanging in them. I'm with you. It's just not, it's not as clear cut as just saying you must take down this one poster, because requiring a teacher to do that will have a ripple effect for, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Howard London. There seems to be a disconnect in understanding of what's being said up here and what's trying to be conveyed up here. I agree with you 1,000,000% about censorship. I think you're 100% right about that. Okay, we should not be censoring anything. There are a lot of views that I find abhorrent, but this is America and we have a right to say it. I think, if I'm understanding some of the parents correctly, I think what's being asked is, you say that a teacher or an administrator, whoever, should not be pushing their political views on the students, okay? I agree with you completely. I think everybody here agrees with you completely. There is a poster that says Black Lives Matter in the Spanish classroom, right? What is the line from your perspective that political indoctrination, just to use a encompassing word, is happening beyond just a poster there? Clearly what you're saying to us is, listen, if a teacher wants to put up a poster of a given idea or whatever, it's not our responsibility or our right to censor them. I agree with you, okay? What a lot of the parents here are saying is, okay, when does it go beyond a teacher's allowed to put up any random poster, Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Thin Blue Line, excuse me. What is the next step when we bring, or anybody from any political thought process brings a complaint and says, we have a problem with this as parents, we think it's corrupting our children, we think this is divisive rhetoric. We know you don't want to censor, we agree with you, because this is America and you have the right to say what you want to say, as long as no one is being physically harmed. But what's the next step? When does it become, okay, a poster is okay, but X is not okay? I think that's where the disconnect is. I don't believe that any teacher should be reprimanded for having a poster. I would love to have a conversation with that teacher and say, what do you support when you have a Black Lives Matter poster up? Because I look at Black Lives Matter and I see one thing. Somebody else sees it and they see something else. You could be talking about the group. You could be talking about the ideology. You could be talking about a generic question, okay, as to whether Black Lives Matter. I don't think there's a single person in this room or in this community who would say no. I do not believe that at all. I can't believe anybody would say, no, Black Lives Matter, Black lives do not matter. I can't believe anybody would say that. Anybody would think that. It's beyond childish and stupid. So now the question is, we've gotten past the generic question, what does this poster mean? Does it mean that you support the Black Lives Matter organization, which to a lot of us has done some very detrimental things around the country? Is it the idea that this is a systemically racist country to its core, and black people and other persons of colors have been held back? Okay, what does that poster mean? I'm rambling, as you know, my wife would probably be texting me telling me to shut up at this point. But I think that's where the disconnect is. Censoring is not the way to go. It's not beneficial. I certainly wouldn't support it. But I think what a lot of parents want to know is, when does hanging a poster on either side or any topic, what is the next step that this is beyond a censorable thing? Like, you see what I'm asking? I'm a little tired, so I'm not really getting to the point as quickly as I'd like.
You had a rough day yesterday, so.
Please interrupt me at this point.
Do you want me to interrupt you?
Go right
I can answer
ahead.
your question. So I think the first piece is, if the teacher's doing what we all agree the teacher should be doing, then the student should never know that answer. Right?
Say it one more time.
If the teacher's doing what the teacher should be doing and not sharing their own political views, the students in that room should really never know the teacher's own personal feelings about what that sign means to them, because then they would otherwise be sharing their own personal views. I think the exception of that would be unless that conversation happened in the context of multiple perspectives. Some people believe this, other people believe this. Let's have a discussion. What do we know? What do we think? Like, that's what learning is, right? That happens every day in schools, but it's the multiple perspective piece that's important. It's not, this is how I feel and you should agree with me and feel the same way. It's, some people feel this way and here's the research and documentation and sources, and some people feel this way and here's some documentation, research, and sources. Now, do your own research. Have a debate. Discuss. How do you feel? Why do you feel that way? How do you think the other side feels? Right? That's what learning is, and that's what happens in the classroom. What it should not be is, I have this sign because I believe this, and this is what this sign means for me, and you should all get in line and agree. If that were to happen, then I would say that's where the line has been crossed. And if that line is crossed in any classroom, then I anticipate at the high school level a student to speak up, a parent to speak up, but someone to address the fact that this supposedly happened in a classroom immediately with the teacher, so it could be dealt with appropriately with the teacher, and they're afforded an opportunity to explain what the objective of the lesson was, what was said, what was discussed. And if you're not happy with that, then you go to the principal of that building and have a conversation with them. But at that, I think that's the answer to your question, is when the feelings are that one side of the argument is being pushed with no respect to the other side, that's when the line has been crossed.
Okay. I see your point.
Get some sleep, man. You look tired.
Okay, any other comments from the public? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment portion and ask if the board has any thoughts, comments, questions?
I just want to reiterate one line I heard, and please forgive me, I don't remember who said, it is our job to teach how to think, not what to think. And I believe we don't presume to do that. We want our children to question, put their own personal experiences, have their own experiences, and push back whenever possible. That's a, I'm trying to think of the vocabulary word I'm looking for, but that's a critical thinker, and that's what we're looking for. So whoever said that, thank you.
Well, and I will say that I hear generalizations, things like lack of transparency, lack of accountability, forced ideologies, imaginary boundaries. I'm not sure what that means in a Putnam Valley classroom. Like, it's hard to deal with. Teachers are setting up imaginary boundaries, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means in a third grade classroom or a 8th grade classroom. So it's fine to talk in those broad things, but if I'm going to make things better, I have to know specifically what's happening in a classroom that is damaging children, that is forcing ideologies on them. Because I don't have that information. And if you do, it doesn't help me to say, for you to say, our teachers are forcing their ideologies on children, and I don't know who, what, where, how, when, why. No, what I'm saying is, it's really hard when the district has been accused of forcing ideologies on children, and I'm not sure clearly what that means. So it would help for me to know what exactly is happening. Okay. But this was, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Any other board comments? Okay. I'd like to convene. I'd like to. No, I'm sorry, sir. I asked 3 times.
It's just one question. It's going to take 10 seconds. Why can't you make a rule, all of you right now, saying there's no political stuff in any of our classrooms? What if a teacher wants to hang a Confederate flag? Can you do that? It's history. Can you do that? That's different. Why is it different?
Excuse me. Excuse me. The meeting is, I'd like to adjourn the meeting to an executive session.
Why can't you guys vote right now? You guys make the rules, right? Why can't you all say there's no political BLM? What if somebody put a white lives matter? That would be racist, right? Take the flag down, take the poster down, and be done with it. Vote on it right now. We can't go into what shirt?
Excuse me, public comment has closed. You had your opportunity. We asked multiple times if there were, listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We're trying to explain to her, because you guys all know.
Our kids should not know where the teachers stand politically, bottom line. You need to convey that message to your teachers.
The one that has the BLM.
Our students should not be afraid to submit a paper with their opinion in fear that their English teacher is going to grade them differently because they stand on a different side politically. And that's what I have a problem with. Or that when we contact Mr. Mello after hearing a Zoom call about a history teacher highlighting communism in such a positive way and comparing communism to the Smurfs, for God's sakes, and then when we present this to Mr. Mello, he says, oh, you shouldn't be listening to a Zoom. Well, it's in my kitchen during COVID, and I'm hearing this conversation, and that was not the response that I would have liked to hear. I would like to hear, I'm going to talk to that teacher, and we're going to discuss this, because obviously communism is wrong and is bad, and I get it, you're learning about history, but don't highlight it as a positive thing. This is going on in the classrooms. You're not aware of it. Our kids know where every teacher basically stands politically, and they should not. Third graders.
Thank you for your comments. I'd like a motion to adjourn the meeting and convene an executive session.
Resolve the recommendations, excuse me, resolve the recommendations of the superintendent of schools to convene executive session for one matter of the employment history of one particular person and one matter of the collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, the Taylor Law. Second.
After which time no further business will be conducted. Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes.